Welcome to Legal and Wealthy, the podcast for lawyers who are ready to stop playing small and start building true wealth and a career and life of their dreams, powerfully and purposefully. Whether you're a law student, new associate, or seasoned attorney, this show is for those who are ready to take charge of their law career in a new way. I'm your host, Lauren Klein, attorney, law firm owner, professor, and founder of Legal and Wealthy. Here, we don't just practice law, we practice liberation and becoming wealthy attorneys. Because being a great lawyer shouldn't come at the cost of your time, your peace, or your financial freedom. Every week, you'll get the strategy, mindset, and wealth building guidance that law school never gave you. So you can go from just surviving your career to building a legacy through it. Let's get to work. Welcome back to Legal and Wealthy. Today, I am sitting down with Robert Furlong. We're going to be talking about building and protecting wealth for lawyers, and specifically some exposures that all of us lawyers from a financial perspective need to be thinking about. Because many of us are earning a strong income, but we often feel uncertain about our long-term financial future. I know better than anyone else that high income alone does not create wealth. Wealth comes from strategy and protection and conversations with incredible professionals like Bob. So Robert Furlong is a financial advisor with the Bulfinch Group who works closely with individuals, families, and business owners, including many attorneys, to help them build and protect long-term wealth. He specializes in asset protection, wealth accumulation, we all want that, and financial planning strategies to give clients a clear understanding of their financial health and to give them confidence about making decisions about their future. He holds a certified exit planner designation, which places him among a select group of professionals trained to help business owners prepare for successful transitions and long-term wealth planning. His guiding philosophy, which we're going to talk about today as well, is centered around what he calls his worthy ideal, inspiring individuals and families and business owners to think and live, I love this, uncommonly so they can enjoy lives filled with health and happiness and optimism. Bob, this is why I was so excited to have you on, because that is all of what we are about here, building wealth, but also having a happy life. So welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me on.
So let's dive in. We were chatting before we started recording, and I'm really excited to hear about some of the topics, that we were discussing. But let's start with this, because I think this is something that is really impactful and relevant for lawyers. So many of us measure our success by our income alone, right? Whether we own our own law firm, we're at a boutique or midsize, or oftentimes, especially, when we're in big law. But financial health means so much more. So when you help clients with their financial health, what does that really mean?
Oh, thanks for asking. I think I try to do it in the way that I would have liked to have been done for me when I was the client, but I didn't really know what that meant at the time. I think the value that I think my clients tell me that they get out of the relationship is that it's a relationship. I just had a meeting no less than like 20 minutes ago. I was just coming out of a meeting with clients that I've been with for 14 years. And one of the things that I talked to them about was that they have he's a doctor and she works for a company, and their son, who I've known since he was very little, is now a freshman in high school. And I said, no, we want to make sure we start to put together a plan with a college planner. They're like, of course. So I think we have to think three-dimensionally as opposed to just like this vertical of just assets under management, and do they go up, do they go down, and have a nice little conversation about income, and then, goodbye, I'll see you in a year, right? I think having high touch with clients, talking to them, letting them know that they can reach out to you when anything pops up. I talk about a lot of us have aging parents. Nobody taught us how to handle that. So I say, something happens to mom, she slips, she falls, call me up. They're like, are you kidding me? I thought you managed my money and managed my risk. And I'm like, well, that's your life, right? These are people that you love. They're an extension of you. So, and that's the thing that gives me the greatest amount of joy is that I just really enjoy helping people achieve what they want to achieve, but also let them know that they have some like, guardrails around their life, that they're not going to completely go off the edge if something happens. I had that from personal experience. I went through a very, very tough time during the financial crisis with my old company. Had to close that, and then I started my practice 15 years ago, and it was really on the encouragement of a good friend of mine who founded our firm that said, "I really think you need to do this." First thing I said to him was, "What is that?" Because I was not a client, and my experience as having been a client of someone else was just that vertical. Oh, your money's up, your money's down. And there were conversations about kids and marriage and stuff like that, but not really any comprehensive planning. And what really attracted me to our organization was that, wow, this is kind of what was missing in my life. I went to a great university. Nobody taught me how to manage money or what I should be putting away or how the market works or any of that stuff. And I always felt kind of dumb, like, oh, what questions do I ask? And so I try my best not to use a lot of jargon. I talk to clients. I ask a lot of good questions. I talk to clients about what's important to them because it's different person to person, family to family. But I think a lot of us have a lot of weirdness around money. I mean, a lot of us have shame or guilt or regret. And I think that those negatives often get in the way of our, embracing success or handling our money correctly. I will often say to clients, money is an artificial construct to enable us to trade time for goods and services for time, and not to get so caught up with the money, but actually what we want to accomplish in life, what we want to do for the people we love, and the charitable inclinations we have, and also just having security. Because I think we all go through periods, I went through a very tough period of feeling like I had no security left. And I share that with clients because they often come to me having a lot of guilt. The first meeting I have with clients is typically like, oh, they want to tell me all the things they've done wrong. And early on, I'll say, hey, if it's okay, I want to give you amnesty on the things you've done before you met me. And they usually relax a little bit. And I say, because I'll show you why. And then I share some stories with them, and they're like, wow, that's really, I said, so you're never going to go through some of the stuff I went through because I'm going to look out for you. And so that's what gives me joy. So
I love that. And a couple of things really, stuck out to me from what you just said, Bob. The first being the shame or the regret. I talk to a lot of lawyers who are salty about their student loans. They say, I didn't really understand what I was, getting myself into. I ended up going to this, very expensive private school, whereas I could have went to this other school, maybe a state school or a school that was ranked a little bit less, lower, but I could have got a scholarship. And they have a lot of shame or regret. And I think it really, based on my conversations with them, it stops them from moving forward. Like they feel like somehow they're in this hole that they'll never get out of. What would be like if a client was sitting before you and they were saying these things to you, what would you kind of say to help them shift out of that? Because that sentiment doesn't help, right?
I hear it all the time. And especially with attorneys more than anybody, because I think, I work with a lot of doctors as well, and doctors, I think, kind of get it that they have, it's expected that you have to make this major contribution of time, money, energy, and toil. I look at it as starting any business. You have to make some kind of initial investment. Sometimes there's a certain amount of sunk cost, or you have to borrow. And I work with, I work a lot with manufacturers and small companies that, they have to take out like SBA loans because they want to buy a factory or a building, or they want to buy a business that exists. And I think, I often will just say, well, first off, there's nothing you can do about changing the past. You can't. And I think regret is one of the most, it sucks energy out of us, right? Because it doesn't go to anything. If you're sitting there worrying about something you did from before, you can't change it. I mean, so the first thing is, okay, you made this investment, and in essence, you invested. You made a capital investment in a future business, if you look at it as that, I did the same thing when I started my practice, and ours is different in that I had to go without income for a certain amount of time. But it's not too dissimilar. But you made an investment in something that you now need to get some kind of return on that investment, and it is you have to be responsible to know that is part of your I don't know, strategy overall, or your action is that, okay, got the degree, passed the bar. Now I'm here to do good, but I also have to do well because I have this responsibility, but I also have often responsibility of family and children, et cetera. And I think that there's been a lot said about educational expense, and there's a lot that could be said about it. But I mean, once it's paid, or once it's owed, one of the big things is you can't get out of it. That's the thing about that kind of expense. It's not dischargeable, so you have to start getting used to it. And again, I'll say, well, can we just break it down? I try to break things down into bite-sized chunks. I often will just, can you take me back to the beginning? Why did you want to become an attorney in the first place? And if you can look at that, then the investment makes sense. Because at one point they decided to make it. Matt, I think sometimes we can play like, well, maybe I didn't know, or, well, you did make a decision. You're an adult at this point. You need to kind of deal with the responsibility of that emotionally and intellectually as well as fiscally. But, maybe we just have to get back to what the why is. What's your driver anyway? Years ago, I met Simon Sinek. It was a really great meeting. I met him in 2008. And I love the whole concept of, everybody responds to why we do what we do, not how we do it or what we actually do. And I think that this is something that can get lost when we beat ourselves up. And so why did you become an attorney? I ask this often of my own clients, and the stories you hear are great. Oh, my father had been a judge, my brother, or I grew up and something happened to the family. It was because we had, that I thought this, and it's a very honorable rationale behind it. So I'm like, well, wherever there's honor, then there's a solution, because, and sometimes you just have to get back to that and say, okay, all right, well, you did this for the right reason, and your goals are honorable, and what you want to provide. Now you just got to come up with a solution to retire that debt. And it might seem insurmountable, but maybe on the other side. So let's go back to the beginning a little bit. Great. We now know why we did it. Let's project ourselves into the future. So I often like to talk about the top of the mountain conversation. So do you know what that is? You ever hear that one?
No, please tell me more.
Years ago from a presenter, and I thought it was brilliant. And this was the middle of the financial crisis when I was not in good shape. There was a presenter, this gentleman, Benjamin Zander. He wrote a book called The Art of Possibility, and I recommend. Actually, I'm not recommending it, but I like reading it. If you want to read it, find it. But anyway, I joke about recommendations. I have to be careful because of the way I'm licensed. But I like the book, but I really like meeting him more than anything. I met him at a conference, and he said that people he taught in his class. He said on the first day of his class, he says, everybody's getting an A. What you have to do is come in tomorrow and tell me. I'm going to fast forward you into the future of you getting an A. Now you got to tell me how you got there. And in reality, at the top of the mountain. So it's very hard for most of us to say, "Oh, here's the mountain. How am I going to climb up? I can kind of go that way. I might be able to go this way, and I'm going to run into a truck." And we put all the impediments. Because of the way that human brains are wired, right? We're like, "Oh, this is going to that could kill me, or that's going to collapse, or there's going to be a rock slide." If we can project ourselves to the top of the mountain, and then we look down, and we can look at what's the path, we can see the path more clearly, right? If we can envision that. So, hey, you have this $200,000 of debt. You capitalize a business, which you have now. You're going to be generating income for that, hopefully an accelerating income over time, which will provide you the things that you need, because we need income to pay for stuff. Let's imagine a time when it's paid off. How do you feel? Awesome. Okay, now let's go back in time, like at each stage, and like you're rewinding the tape. What did you do the 6 months before you paid it off? What did you do the 2 years before you paid it off? And people get lighter and they see it and they get it. And then it's like, okay, now we know all the way. Now we know what the steps are. Now we'll start it today. And I think what that does for them is they go, oh, okay, the guilt falls away. And now it's just hard work. And in hard work, I don't know whether it's true, but there was the old saying that said, "Not hard work never killed anybody." I'm sure someone could give me an alternative to that, but it's just hard work, and most things that are worth anything are worth a lot of hard work. So,
and these are people who have already done a lot of hard work and proved to themselves they can.
I think you've proven that you could pass the bar. That's not easy. I've known people that haven't passed the first time out, and yeah. You've done a lot of the hard work already. Now you just have to do a different type of hard work.
I love that perspective, the top of the mountain. That's really, really good. And the other thing that you said in the beginning that really stood out to me was the lack of education on money and finance and investing when all of us are in school. I mean, I was a finance major and I still feel like I left university with a very limited understanding. But in law school, there's very few classes even on, starting a law firm, or if you're at a firm, building a book of business. No matter what capacity you're in, you are a business. And I think that's a really great way to look at your debt as capitalizing the business and your career as the business. So because so many of us do not receive any sort of financial education through law school, what exposures and pitfalls do you see, or roadblocks do you see with your lawyer clients specifically? This episode of Legal and Wealthy is brought to you by Law Firm Sites. Law Firm Sites has been building custom websites and providing online marketing for law firms for over 23 years. They are good at what they do because that's all that they do. If you are looking to expand the reach of your firm or just improve your online presence, Law Firm Sites has the team to do it. Go to lawfirmsites.com or call 1-800-932-8242 and mention Legal and Wealthy to receive 10% off any of their website or marketing packages.
Yeah, well, it's funny, and I never make the common jokes that people make about attorneys because I actually do have a lot of compassion for them. I don't know whether I told you, my previous business, we owned retail stores. We had high-end retail stores in Boston. And let's just see if you can see the analogy. You start the year with nothing. You have a whole lot of ups and downs throughout the year, and you're hoping to finish the year with more money than you started with, which is very. And then right when you have this great finish, it's January 1st again. So there's so the first thing is you have to understand that it's a marathon, not a sprint, and that you have to find ways to take some of the the downs out. Right? Like, how can you deal with when things are slow? I have a client who, is a real estate attorney, and it's been a, tough couple of years as far as, especially if you're doing residential closings. It's like, rates are high and, not as many things are going on or things are happening. And I said, you have to, typically I'll say to all of my clients, build in some cushion for when things don't happen. Right. So if you're not billing, make sure you have resources that you've saved up. I mean, I think the idea of understanding of what your spend is and living within that, and not financing assets that are depreciating assets. Like, you want to buy a home because you're going to pay interest on something that's going to grow, but don't buy something on sale so you can put it on a credit card and pay interest on that. But I think that the biggest challenge of being an attorney or having like a retail business or restaurants or whatever is that you do have this, like, I'm doing really great, I'm not really doing great, I'm doing really great. I think a lot of it is finding someone that knows you, that can kind of take you through some of the down times. But the other stuff that you have to do is you have to be very, very well protected. When we think about attorneys, I think of attorneys and doctors as being intellectuals that like get really paid for their knowledge and their execution of that, right? Something happens and that person cannot work for whatever reason. They're injured or they're hooked up to a machine. They cannot do their job. And what I tend to run across. So none of this stuff was taught to me in college. I was pre-med all the way through college before I got into the family business. I have a BA in psychology. I didn't take a single finance class. I took all those after I exited my last business. But I like it would have been nice. Like I do. One of the charities I work with is providing financial literacy to kids who are grown up in foster care. I mean, it's actually one of
Mm,
the charities I was connected to it by one of my clients, and I like these kids. When you think of anybody who's had it really rough, there's nobody that's had it rougher than these kids, and some of them are like,
it's true.
the light bulb goes on with them, and you say, hey, you know what? Don't spend more than you make. Some of these things, it sounds like truisms, but not everybody gets them, and I think that again, the reason why I like that charity is that we most often when I talk to people about, I ask them the question, where did you learn about money? And and it's usually parents or somebody, some elder person, and if and it's usually dependent upon whether that person had a good handle on money, and we can't guarantee that because some people are they're not good with money, and their kids are not good with money. It's generationally like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think a lot of what I talk to people about is, the reason why certain people are very successful with money is the advisory coaching that they get, and often they get it at a very young age. So
Mm,
there's a whole bunch of people. There's a core of a bunch of people that get it, and then it's really not. It's left out of every curriculum. I like applied math. Applied math is, how does math work? Like, in the best one is money, right? If you save money, I was talking to someone recently, and they said, "Oh, we've been meaning to do a budget." Is one of the ones I used to hear. I don't hear it less often now, but I used to hear it all the time. We've been meaning to do a budget, and I'm like, can I hazard a guess as to why you've probably never done a budget? And they're like, why? And I said, the word budget. Is there anything positive about that word? And they're like, no. I said, it sounds like cheap, doesn't it? Oh, it's like, do you want to have a budget meal or fly on a budget airlines? How about if we talk about a spending plan? And their
mm,
eyes light up, and they're like, yeah, a plan of how much you're going to spend. I mean, it's okay to spend money. I like stuff. I used to sell stuff for a living, and the thing is, just don't, like, too much stuff means too much money going out and not going into things that can create more money. And it's sometimes it's just really simple things like that, because I think, again, it's, none of this stuff is meant to be like, take every dime you have and put it into a coffee can, but let's make sure that we know what we're spending, so we know how much money we make. If we know how much we spend, we can figure out how much we can save, and then let's just be systematic about it. The vast majority
yeah.
of people that have any money are inside of qualified plans, because those go in every week or every pay period. Hey, what if we kind of use some of those strategies? One of my clients I was just talking to recently, years ago, he's a physician, and he said to me, Bob, I never seem to have any cash. I said, what do you mean? You live in a great house, you have a great family. He goes, yeah, but I like to have a little bit of cash. So I said, okay, this is what we're going to do. And I think it was something goofy, like $500 a month. I said, we're going to suck $500 a month out of this account. I'm going to put it in this account where you have to call me up to get it. And he's like,
Love it.
that sounds kind of juvenile. I said, you asked for it. I said, it's not meant to be disrespectful. I'm just going to put it over here. And when you want it, you just have to email me, Bob, can I have some money out of that? And at the end of the year, he's like, I was looking through my stuff. Where did this $6,000 come from? And I said, I know you went to Yale and then Harvard Medical School. Okay. And I know you're really bright, but not everybody is bright and everything. And I said, it's because you put 500 times 12 is $6,000. He goes, oh, okay. I said, we good? He goes, yeah. 3 years later, he's like, oh, and again, this is not really, I help people with mitigate risk and decide on how they're going to invest money. This is just giving him some sense of safety and security, and just getting him to recognize how much he was spending. And some of it was just
Yeah.
throwaway, right? And then he called me up like about a year later. He goes, oh, we need a new HVAC for our condo. And I said, oh, that's great. How much do you need? 10 grand. I said, I'll just wire it back to your account. I said, you have the money. That's why we saved it. We really saved it so you wouldn't spend it on, sneakers and stuff, but we have it now. He goes, oh, that's kind of cool. Okay, thanks. And it's, again, some of this stuff is not like highly, it's kind of basic things, right? Spend
But
less than
I love that because we often miss the basics, especially professionals, medical professionals, legal professionals. Like we miss
right.
the foundation.
Well, and I think attorneys too, that they have a complex profession, right? They're dealing with human beings and they're dealing with probabilities and stuff, and they're looking at things from different angles. And I often joke with a typical attorney probably did debate in high school, so they're used to kind of arguing this and that. And at some point, you got to pick a lane and be comfortable with that. And I think if there's anything I've noticed from time to time, and again, I'm half joking, but don't argue against your own best interest. It's you do have to. I knew an immigration attorney some time ago, and she was saying, "Oh, we're not making enough money, my family and myself." And I said, "Okay." And again, not giving advice on this, but like looking at, I said, "Can I tell you the way I see it?" And she said, "What?" And I said, "There's like three ways in any business you can increase income. One is just see more people. If you're a professional, you see more people, right? If you're a business, be open more hours, more days. So, okay, you're a lawyer, you just have to see more clients." And she's like, "Bob, I'm like overwhelmed. I have too many people already." I said, "That's hard, right? Because you got to. Do you want to stay till 8 o'clock and not see your family and have dinner with your kids? That's a big sacrifice. It might be not one that even people want to do with you, right? The second one is hire more associates and bring them on, and they make a certain amount of money, and you're going to have some portion, they have another portion, et cetera." And she said, "That's really hard too." And I said, "Yeah, it isn't never easy to get more staff or even more professionals in your organization." And she said, "We've had sometimes people stay and go." And I said, "That's a separate conversation we can have." And I said, "The third way is you raise your rates." Oh,
Hmm.
I thought she was going to slug me. She was like, "I can't do that." And she said, "I can't do that. I have people that really need me." And I said, "Well, and again, I'm not telling you to do it. I'm just saying this is how business runs. You do this, or you just stay where you are. The fourth option is you don't do anything." And I said, "Well," and so I said to her, she was a good friend. So I'm like, "I'm not here to beat you up about the fact that you have to do that." I said, "That you just asked me, how do I make more?" She said, "I can't do that because I'm dealing with people who are like, they're trying to stay in the country." This is years ago, by the way. And I said, "I know, but your business is somewhat mission oriented, but you also have to stay in business. If
Hmm.
you don't stay in the law, if you decide, because I'm sure there are attorneys out there that decide, I can't stay in the law, I'm going to do something else." And I know doctors that stop being doctors. I'm like, "How could you have gone to school that?" They're like, "I just can't." But anyway, so I said, you have to stay solvent. You have to take care of your family. You have to take care of yourself. You have to actually pay off, you have to do that so you can provide these great services to people. So you have to find a balance. You can't be so self-sacrificial that you don't take care of yourself, because you also can't call upon your clients when you're 70, 80, 90 years old to come in and pay your bills, because then they just, they're not going to do it.
Yeah.
So I think there's a hard, it's often the people that have the greatest amount of like their driver for doing it is very mission oriented. And I think this is true
Hmm.
about a lot of business people. I've met people that run a small business, and they'll say, "Oh, this isn't just a job, it's a mission." And I say, "Well, can we deconstruct that a little bit? A job is a place where you trade time for money. Is it that?" And she's like, "Then yeah." And I said, "Well, that's what it is. If you want," I said, "mission oriented stuff, I think we should always do that in our spare time for our community or our charity. But your job is your job, you know."
Hmm.
And I think, so I think that also drives people to be okay. I have to be better at making sure that people are billed correctly. That I'm Because you also have people within the organization you got to take care of. All these people are counting on you. You can't be a little wishy washy about your own planning. The other part
Yeah.
of this is people think that I can do a financial plan for my business, so I'm all set on the personal. And it's like, the business is not going to save you if you're a terrible saver. I have to often explain to people that there's not always going to be a market for the business you have. My old business, I had to close. I didn't get anything for it at the end, and that's how most businesses are. So, making sure that you're diligent every year about setting aside money uh, uh, and I'm just stupid with like analogies, but I'll say, hey, every money you save is like sending love letters to your older self. Why don't you think of it that way? It's a little bit more glorious than, and there's a reason why you're doing it. It's so you can take care of yourself, so that you don't become dependent.
Yeah.
Um, and but
Yeah.
it's hard. It's hard. There's a lot of nice, bright, shiny objects out there that we all want, and I think it's even harder for attorneys because they're around a lot of people that have a lot of money, and living to a certain lifestyle um, is hard. The keeping up with the Joneses and everything else is not easy.
It's not easy. And sometimes, is it even something that you really want, or is it just something you feel like you're supposed to have? I'm noticing something, Bob, that you're really, really good at. Like you've done this a few times of like you're saying, okay, my client said this, and then I shifted the perspective completely. And it's fascinating because it's sometimes just that one perspective shift. Like, okay, my clients need me, I can't charge more. Okay, yeah, but if you go out of business, you can't help any of them. Like it's just those little shifts that can change, they can change everything. I'd be curious to hear for your attorney clients too. Like, okay, if they're like, all right, I've raised the rates, I've hired the associates, I've put in maybe more hours, maybe I've done all of the things, but I'm still feeling capped. Like, are you seeing? I mean, obviously they're invested in the market, but are you seeing them taking more chances? Like, are they investing in real estate? Are they being a little bit riskier in the market? Like, what are other things that you can, without financial advice, of course, that you think
Right.
lawyers might want to consider?
I think that they do have to consider that, you know, um, I am a certified exit planner. So my drive behind that to get that designation was really about the fact that nobody did that for me, and that's why I ended up with nothing for my business. I had opportunities to sell my business, but I was like, I'm too young, so.
Mm,
And the challenge for attorneys is, I mean, there's so many challenges there. It's not like something that private equity is coming along and buying law firms. Oh, maybe. And every time I say something like that, somebody goes, "Oh, wait a minute." But it because there's no guarantee of recurring revenue. It's not like a CPA firm that every year people got to come back and do their taxes, or a dental office where you see them twice a year. Lawyers, I mean, and I think this is one of the hardest parts is people tend to see the lawyer only when they have to, so
hmm
I think it behooves that person. And you were talking about the interesting thing about risk. I think the biggest mistake that I see with people is they don't save enough percentage of their income, and then they
mm,
expect it's going to be made up on the percentage of growth, right? So I'll just use like simple math. If somebody made like $500,000 and they saved $100,000, that's $100,000 every year. That's very, very impactful. And then if you get a reasonable rate of return on that, that's just going to grow. And there's this goofy thing called the rule of 72 that, like, if you take 72 and divide it by even like whatever rate of return, let's just say, an 8% rate of return, the money's going to double in 9 years. So 72 divided by 8. But people tend to think of like, oh, I don't really like, everything I do with clients is to wrap a little bit more protection around them, because often to get where they are now, they had to take a lot of risk, right?
hmm
There's a risk going to law school. There's a risk to spending all that money and having all that debt. There's a risk to founding a company. So I'll often say, hey, if we can like buffer a little bit of the downside, find some ways to like not have as many downs, but the other side that we can make up and kind of manage some of the risk also is we save more. If you can save more, you're never going to. Well, I've never really seen people make up for a lack of savings by market returns, and I think that's where, not to beat up on my industry, but I think there's a lot of people in financial services that are like, oh, it's all about the rate of return you get. It's all about making sure that people are being smart and how much money they're and people get confused about saving. They think saving is just what goes into the bank. Not, I'll just say not spent. So let's talk about how much we're not spending this year, and can we get that higher, because the average American does not reserve enough money. They're if someone saves 5% of their income, that I'll often use the comparison. I work with a lot of partnerships, right? If you worked with a partner and the proceeds came in and that partner got 50%, you got 50%, you feel pretty good, right? Hey, we're an equal part. If you're equal partners, by the way, we're equal partners, we get half of the proceeds. And then the next year they get 60%, you get 40. And the next year, and after a couple of years, they're getting 85 and you're getting 15. Would you feel a little annoyed by them? Well, that's the deal you're making with the world. You're taking in your income and you're keeping like less than five, like again, the average. And don't check me on this number because you can look it up. I don't know what it is right now because it fluctuates. But if the average is 5%, that means people are giving away 95% of their money. I'm not just talking about tax or anything else like that. Spending on stuff, spending on experiences or whatever. 95% of your money going out and you keeping five, you're not going to make it up in rate of return, right? So, and I think people get excited. They run to the thing that's exciting. Oh, I heard this got something. By the time you heard it did really well, is you might be late to the party. You know, I like, when I'm working with clients and managing their money, I ultimately are going to look like, how do we have enough diversification? So certain things are going to be underperforming and certain things are going to be overperforming, but we're going to get to some happy medium. But we can't do that if there's nothing coming in, right? Like if you're like, well, I want to put money in this year, but we had these unforeseen stuff, you're only taking away from yourself. Now we can't. The thing I get most concerned about with attorneys is I think too many of them work too long. I had someone say to me at one point in the last couple of days is like, it's not about attorneys retiring so much as it's about them expiring. It's like they expire from the industry more often than not.
Yes.
And not
Yes.
just death. I mean, it's like some of it is like expire, like they just can't do it anymore, right?
Yeah.
To work too long, I think is a tragedy, but I think the reason why, and this is true about business owners all the time. I every now and then I'll get someone who says, I know you do exit planning. My father-in-law has a business. He's 85. And I say, I don't want to talk to him. And they're like, why? He's a really nice person. I said, no, it's going to be so sad for me because there's very little I can do for him. And they'll say, well, what do you
Yeah.
mean? No one's been able to convince him for the last 20 years to retire. He doesn't even know me. How am I going to convince him to do that? Plus he's 85 now and it's going to be tragic. So
Yeah.
I think like mortgaging the future by spending in the current, like overspending in the current, I think is very, very dangerous, but I think it's very common. And I think that to be uncommon is to say, you know what, I'm not going to do what everybody else is doing. I'm going to, you know what, I'm going to save more. I'm going to be a little bit more frugal. I'm going to be intentional about my spending. I'm going to take vacations. I'm going to have stuff, but maybe, even every now and then I'll discover something that I'm like, I can't believe how dumb I've been for the last few years. For years, I leased a car. We all have, see again, like shame. So we all have a degree of shame. I was like, I had a car that my lease was coming up and I talked to the dealership. I'm like, how much more? Why is this so much more? Well, we forget that you're not really, you're kind of buying it, but you're not owning it, but you're still paying an interest rate like you are. And like you're
Yeah.
buying it and interest rates were high. Right. So I stopped and I looked and then I bought I bought a nice Lexus that was a couple of years old that had like low mileage on it. I'm like, what kind of idiot am I? I could have been doing this like the last 20 or 30 years. And, but like even me, like this is what I do for a living. But I was like, oh, somebody told me it was a great idea to do this. I'm not saying do this or don't do that. I'm just saying that I had this realization that even though I manage money and manage my own cash flow, that every now and then I can learn something new, and sometimes it takes interest rates being high for me to go, maybe I'll buy that with cash. Oh, it's a depreciating asset. I'm buying it with cash. That kind of makes sense. Like, duh. So,
Yeah.
I think incremental change, if somebody's, this is a great math quiz for you. Sorry, I don't want to quiz you on math, but I'm going to anyway. If someone's saving 5% of their income and they decide and they're able to save 6% of their income, what percentage increase have they just had?
Well, 1% for that first moment, but infinitely more over time with compounding.
Well, what's interesting about it, and that's when you have to think about percentage. It's a 20% increase in savings because they went from 5 to 6 is a 20% increase in savings. But we tend to think of it as, yes, it's 1% more of their over, but it's a 20% increase. So I
Yeah.
think often in talking to people is we want to talk about improvement. How much improvement did you use? You actually made a 20% improvement. And again, it might be part of the way that I asked it. I'll take some responsibility for that. but
Also,
I'll take all the
lawyers,
responsibility for that.
math.
No, but you know what I mean? It's kind of like if you're exercising and you're doing 10 reps and you can do 12, that's a 20% increase. It's not a 2% increase, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
often when I talk, especially young people, because I have a bunch of young people that I mentor, and they'll say, "Can you sit in this meeting?" And I'm like, "Sure," because I love to talk to young people about saving more and just being smarter about money, and I think that people miss that because they're like, "Oh, I'm only saving five. How did you do this year? I'm saving six." I'm like, you had a 20% increase. That's celebrate the
Yeah.
improvement because again, if we celebrate the improvement, that inspires us to improve more, which will celebrate the improvement, right?
Yes.
And that's the that's the way that we get from 5 to 6 to 10 to 12 or whatever. It's not going to happen overnight, and it's not easy, and it's kind of I had a going back to the rate thing. I had an electrical contractor I was working with that was talking about, oh, I have had difficulty. I said, have you talked about raising rates? And a year later, they're like, our profit's up by 20%. And I said, how's that? Anybody leave when you raise rates? And they're like, oh, wait a minute, we raised, so a lot of this stuff is, I think, and again, when I'm working with very educated, very intelligent people, sometimes the small stuff is overlooked because it doesn't seem
Yeah.
like it's very impactful. If you have that 20, hey, how about for the next 3 years we just do a 20% increase over what you've been saving, and then before you know it, it's like, oh my God, I was saving six, now I'm saving 12, but it took some
Yeah.
time. Right? It took some time
Yeah.
to accumulate that debt. Now let's get rid of it. Okay, it will take us some time.
Hey, let's be honest. Are you a high functioning attorney or law student, but kind of low key exhausted, maybe successful on paper, but secretly wondering, is this it? That's exactly why I created the Wealthy Lawyer Reset. It is a 6-day reset for lawyers and law students who are done with burnout, chaos, money, energy, and just running on fumes. For 6 days, we reset your mindset, your money, and your nervous system because we cannot build true wealth and have great health if we are living in survival mode. It's just the fact of the matter. And because I am that kind of girl, we end with a virtual yoga session with the Aman Costigan. So you're not just wealthy on paper, you're regulated, grounded, and actually enjoying your life. This is not about hustling harder. It's about recalibrating everything so your wealth and your health can feel calm, aligned, and sustainable. If you're ready to enter your wealthy lawyer era without burnout, join me inside the Wealthy Lawyer Reset. 6 days, one reset, a completely different relationship with money, your health, and your success. Check out the show notes or go to my Instagram to learn more about the Wealthy Lawyer Reset. I think the thing is, like, all of these things, we kind of know them, but it's almost like we want something bigger and more exciting and sexier. We're like, tell me the strategy, give me all the strategies. And it's like, it's really, yes, once you start doing this part, there's more you can do down the road. But
Right.
if you're missing this part, the easy part, like the simple part, it's not easy, but it's simple.
Well, I was in the gym the other day, and the number of times I'll just kind of nicely say to somebody who's like using, somebody's doing this and they're trying to work on their lats and they're like leaning this way. I said to this older gentleman, I said, you're going to injure your back that way. Plus, you're not pulling with the right muscles. And he goes, oh, thanks. And I said, I'm not saying that, I'm not here to be critical. Have you thought about this? I think that the other part of this stuff too is I think that the secret to improvement is asking good questions. You know, I had the toughest time in my practice was the first couple of years because I had run a business for a long time where everybody like way too often would come to me and ask me for what to do next. I need some direction. What do we do next? What are we doing with this? And I felt like I was, and that's a very poor way to run a business, by the way. You want to have like 2 or 3 people report to you, but I had 50 employees. So more often than not, people like, Bob knows I'm not going to make a decision. I'm going to go to him. So for years, I told people what to do. When I got into my practice, I tried that strategy. It doesn't work around this stuff, by the way, because people, that's all people have gotten their whole life. They're like, well, I have this. Well, do this. Well, I
Yeah.
don't, if it was effective, I'm sure people have told them to do it before. So I try as much as possible to say, I don't know. Have you thought of, I might say, um, asking the question of, how does that make you feel? Or what do you envision this to look like? Or if you're at the top of the mountain, what does that look like? Or even like the soft questions of, you know, that question, hey, would you feel better if you had a 20% increase in savings? Yeah. Well, all you have to do is this. Oh my God, it's that.
Mm.
Yeah, it's actually, it might be easier than you think. That's, I can never say it right, but the old saying of how does one eat an elephant, one bite at a time. And I think that that's probably if there's anything like connective tissue to this conversation is if you can break it down into bite-sized pieces, you can get change quicker than you can imagine, but it's still going to take time and patience. I've never been known as being a patient person. For the last 2 years, I meditate every morning just on patience, by the way. And the first 6 months, I was like, I don't have enough time to meditate. Um, so a lot of this is just being patient enough to let the results happen. The analogy of going to the gym. If you try to like put on the heavy weight right away, you're going to hurt yourself, and then you're going to be out for 6 weeks while your muscles reknit. Why don't you just do do it consistently, do it incrementally, have incremental improvement, and after a surprisingly short time, you'll see, oh my God, that actually adds up. And it seems like it seems like it's innately logical. That's why I think the term common sense is one of the worst terms possible, because we're now shaming ourselves for not having common. It's like that's so obvious. It isn't obvious. None of this
Yeah.
stuff is obvious. It's
It's
just
not.
no, it isn't. Because it takes time for us to really, and sometimes it you know I sometimes it comes through coaching, sometimes it comes through advisory, and I often will, when someone asked me the other day what I actually do for a living, and I'm like, I spend time with clients and ask them what they want, and then I find ways for them to get there with the least amount of moves, and they mostly stay with me
Mm.
happier than when they met me. I don't
So
know. It
good.
doesn't sound overly complex.
So good. So good.
So,
As we kind of wrap this up, I want to circle back to something we talked about in the beginning about you mentioned it briefly, thinking and living uncommonly. What does that mean, and what can the listeners do to apply that to their lives?
oh, great. Yeah. So, I think that um, the common way of thinking is like the herd mentality of, well, the old saying of like, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result is the definition of insanity, right? And I think that's also similar to what is common, right? So the common person, just the common person doesn't go to law school. I think a person is actually already, most of the way there by making a commitment, law school, medical school, being a professional, starting a business. That is not a common path, right? Um, and so thinking thinking globally uncommonly means that, what, I can't just see something on, especially social media right now is, I think, is riddled with poor advice financially. None of these people have any designations or have any guidelines or have any recourse if they say something wrong. So I think that people should be well read. I think there's value in them knowing people that don't just think exactly the way that they do, that actually challenge them on certain
Mm.
things. That's uncommon, and I think that having a wealth of experience and a wealth of resources, and that even in the work that I do with clients, I do it in conjunction with the attorneys and the CPAs. I often will say, I'm here like quarterbacking things. I'm not here doing everything. I'm only smart in a couple things, but I know a lot of smart people. And I think
Yeah.
the uncommon way of thinking is being open enough to say it's okay for me to invite this cadre of people into my world, and that they'll want to take care of me. And I think that, and that's okay, because more often than not, when I say to my own clients, I say, I take care of people that take care of people. And sometimes those
Yeah.
people that do that kind of work are not always as accepting of the care. And I think that's an uncommon thing. You have to be open to the fact that people actually care about you and care
Mm.
enough to want to take care of you. So I don't know.
So good. So good. Bob, thank you so much for being on today. I love just the way that you look at the world and money and life and business. So thank you for coming on and sharing your insights and your time with us today. Where can everyone find out more about you?
Okay, so they can reach me at Bob Furlong at bulfinchgroup.com. I also, can I get a little plug for my podcast? Is that okay or
Oh,
no?
of course. Please.
So I,
Please.
so I about a year ago, one of my good friend Dominic Carew, who is he coaches attorneys actually. He coaches
Mm.
attorneys on the business side, and he and I were talking about some challenges, and he said we should do a podcast. So I said that would be fun. I said, do I get to name it? And he said, just don't name it something dumb. And I said, oh no, I think I'm going to name it something dumb. We decided to call it Missing Briefs, and because lawyers deal in briefs, and it's a double
Love it.
entendre, and it's
Love it.
puns. It's very punny. But in the title is Missing Briefs: the triumphs and trials of attorneys in private practice. It's very low budget. We do it mostly through Zoom but you can find it. It's kind of fun because all the attorneys that are on are all people that I've known for years. I work in a network of attorneys, and they all have really great stories. So if you go to YouTube and just type in just the way I'm saying it, by the way, Missing Briefs podcast, because I don't know what you'll get if you don't type podcast. But it's been a real gas because again, I think attorneys have a challenge, even the way that they market themselves. So this is a way, it's kind of our love letter to these people that we really care about, to give them exposure, and they in turn will post it on their LinkedIn. So you can find me there. I'm a little stiffer than I am right now because I've gotten better over time, or at least my kids have told me. But and I what I like about it is, and if there are attorneys that want a little bit, want to hop on, we're booking way out now. We've gotten such a response. We've done 19 podcasts on this. But
Nice.
but I'm easy enough. Just drop me an email. I'm on LinkedIn too. I love to make connections on LinkedIn, and I love talking about financial literacy. And I'm pretty low key when it comes to connections.
Amazing. Well, thank you again. Thank you for your time. So wonderful having you on. And thank you to everyone for listening to another episode of Legal and Wealthy.
Thank you very
Talk to
much.
you
Have a
soon.
great day. Take care.
You too, Bob. Bye. Thanks for tuning in to Legal and Wealthy. If today's episode sparked something in you, take it one step further. Share it, leave a review, or come connect with me inside the Legal and Wealthy community. Remember, wealth isn't just about the numbers. It's about how you lead, how you live, and how you build beyond the billable. You already have what it takes to create real freedom and wealth. I'm just here to help you claim it.